19 and 20 and 19. I almost screwed that up. This is, of course, our weekly show for people who are afraid to fly. And you know who you are. And those of you who might know someone who's afraid to fly, or people who are just interested in aviation in general and want to talk airplanes with us. We're glad to welcome you tonight. Tonight we have a poll question. We want to know, what about flying over water bothers you? So first of all, that assumes that something flying over water does bother you. So we're talking about flying across the ocean to either Europe or somewhere in the Pacific. So if you would go ahead and post that post your question or your answer on our Facebook page. That would be absolutely fantastic if you could do that. And then we have a special guest tonight, which is related to our sweepstakes, which we're redoing. Pardon me for bending over here. We're going to redo our sweepstakes with our grand prize being a coaching NAVCAM run, and we have the last sweepstakes winner. We have Terry Foster, who's going to come on and share her experiences with you. We have a couple of news items in the Aviation News Roundup, and then we're going to just kind of review the highlights of our upcoming Clear for Takeoff 201 class in LA on October 26th of this year. And we got the early bird special coming up there. So let me bring on Terry, and we'll talk about her experiences. So Terry, if you want to pop in on us. Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're loud and clear. Okay, and it was just 2 weeks ago. Was it 2 weeks ago tomorrow that you and I flew? Whatever the 21st was of September.
I think so. 2 or 3 weeks ago. I can't remember.
Yeah, maybe it is 3 because it was 2. You flew the week after that. So you were just a joy to work with, and so first of all, what prompted you to enter the sweepstakes?
Well, I had been following your Facebook group and website and the live videos for, I don't know, maybe 6 months, something along those lines. And I had been thinking about getting the FearlessFlight kit. And then I had this conference in Chicago come up at the end of August. So I was definitely getting more anxious about that and thinking about it more, and was just thinking about purchasing it when you announced the sweepstakes. So I'm like, well, I'm going to give that a try and see if I can save a little bit of money that way. And I was really just hoping to win the kit. I didn't think at all I could win the grand prize, and then I did.
Cool. And so tell everybody out there, so what was it about flying? What was your experience with flying? Were you flying before that we did the coaching?
Well, it's been a year since my last flight. Last flight was to La Paz, so just an hour-and-a-half flight. Okay. And the year before that,
down in Mexico. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, La Paz, Mexico. I'm in San Diego, so it's a very close flight, an hour-and-a-half. Yeah. And the year before that, I had flown to Cabo, also just an hour-and-a-half. And then years prior, I had flown about once a year, usually to Central America, so a little longer, about probably 5 to 7 hours altogether. But in the last few years, I've just been wanting to do it less and less, and I'm like, oh, I can just take like closer and closer flights. And then in the last year, I just haven't planned another trip, and I really wasn't looking forward to flying. And then I had an opportunity to go to this work conference that I really wanted to go to, so I'm like, well, I'm going to do it. So
cool. And what were the things that bothered you about flying?
You cut out a little bit. What was the question?
What were the things that bothered you about flying? What were the triggers? What were some of your triggers?
Definitely turbulence, weather, because I am from San Diego, and I think I'm just not used to weather in general. So storms, thunderstorms, kind of any weather. And then I've definitely learned recently that landing is now my biggest trigger. And then there were definitely all the sounds. weren't my main triggers, but they certainly weren't, they were adding to the anxiety, just all the little sounds that you kind of wonder what they are.
Okay. Okay. And I was trying to think, something came up there and I forgot what I was going to say, but anyway, well, so why don't you share with everybody what we did during coaching? What was that like for you?
So we did, I would say, about 3 weeks of coaching on the phone,
Okay.
about once a week.
Uh-huh.
And you sent me the audio files. We spoke for about an hour, just talking about my experience with flying, my fears of flying, my anxiety. And then I would say you spent about half the time talking about the mechanics of flying, and the other half the time talking about the psychology and physiology behind anxiety. And so really kind of coming at it from both sides, that was very helpful. Yeah. And then, and in the meantime, I was watching the live videos and I was, reading up on the information. Once I got the FearlessFlight kit, I read through all of that and watched all the videos immediately and was thinking about those. And then, and after about 3 weeks, you booked the flight and we flew to Las Vegas together a week before my flight to Chicago.
So when we were doing the coaching, did you have any, you're sitting there and you think, oh, this is going to be great because now I don't feel anxious anymore?
Yes. I mean,
I would be totally surprised.
I mean, no, I was definitely still anxious, but sure. I think I was really hopeful that the flight would go so smoothly with you that it would just be this perfect smooth flight, and then I'd have this just this association and memory of a view on, and there just being no turbulence at all.
Right. Yeah. And the reason I ask that is because a lot of people, we get this thing, it's so anxiety provoking that we think that, that we can't go until we feel like it's going to be, like we're not going to have any anxiety. And that's just not the experience. And so, but there are changes that go on as you do the things, as we do the coaching, as you review it, as you use the harmonizer. And the thing that again, you, like so many other people, that amaze me is you stayed engaged. And that's how people get better. You just keep doing the things and you stay with it. So when we got to the airport or the day of flying, what was that like for you then? Or leading up, maybe the night before? How did that compare to other times, as best you can remember them?
I think the screen changed a little bit. I'm looking at Eric.
Okay.
But so the night before, I was definitely getting anxious. I mean, I was feeling the anxiety the night before, but I felt more comfortable than I would on a normal flight, knowing that you were going to be on it.
Uh-huh.
And I was definitely excited to meet you in person after watching you on video for so many months.
Okay.
There was definitely just an added comfort because I think I just kept thinking, well, nothing's going to go wrong with you on the flight, as though you were magically going to make the flight perfect. And so that helped a lot. I still felt the anxiety, and I kind of was wondering oh, am I really doing this? And, I really don't love flying. But yeah, it was definitely comforting just knowing that you were going to be there and we're going to be talking through it, and that we were going to have our coaching sessions before.
Yeah. And were there any challenging parts as we got in the airplane, boarding, getting in the airplane and taxiing out or anything like that? Was there anything that was particularly challenging to you?
I think for getting in the airplane, I mean, normally for me, that part doesn't really make me too anxious. I think as I'm sitting there waiting, I do get a little bit anxious. But then I get on and
to point out to people is all over the years, what I've observed in people is as much as they might dread actually getting on an airplane and flying, once you get on the airplane, now the dread that trickles through sometimes is if we are delayed or while we're waiting at the gate to push back, it's like, okay, I'm here. Let's get this show on the road.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when you're waiting in the airport, you're thinking about it more, but then once you're getting on the plane, you're just thinking about the logistics of getting on the plane.
Sure.
And then with you, we got the pre-boarding and or the early boarding, and we were able to meet the pilots. And thank you for that, because you took me into the you were able to get me into the cockpit and meet the pilots.
Yeah.
The pilots were fantastic, just very confident and knowledgeable and so comforting. So I was really feeling good after that. And then we just had time to settle in. Getting the pre-boarding helps a lot to kind of have time to just sit and, normally settle in. But with you, I was chatting a lot, and that time just went by really quickly with us chatting and talking about what was going on as we were taxiing. So I really wasn't feeling too nervous at that point, I think, until takeoff.
Okay, so things were pretty good then, and you said you weren't feeling too nervous at that point. Was that about normal though? With other flights, are you normally calm there, or was it something you noticed that was noticeably better at that point?
I think it was definitely better. There's one because you were distracting me with talking. We were just because we were kind of nonstop chatting, getting to know each other, and so that was distracting. And then just you being a pilot is very comforting to me. So I definitely would be more nervous as I was waiting at that point. And normally you're quiet and you're just kind of waiting. So the talking really helped.
Yeah, and so then we taxied out, got to the runway for takeoff. Then what's that like? What was it like at that point for you?
The takeoff was bumpy.
Okay.
I mean, the takeoff on the actual runway was bumpier than I remember. And I remember saying to you, like, San Diego, like our airport really needs to be like smoothed out or something, because it just, I just felt like I was being like, jarred around quite a bit as we were taking off. You were talking me through it. And then it definitely helped to think of like the 15-degree angle as we took off. So knowing all the mechanics of that, and knowing the mechanics of the engine sounds, and you were also helping because you were saying, they just started, I forget what it was, they just started this, like, did you hear that? So I could kind of cue in to hear what the different sounds were. So knowing all those mechanics as we were taking off definitely helped. And then I think it was actually a really smooth takeoff once we were past the runway. The runway was really jolting.
Those irregularities in the runway, if you were to drive your car down the runway at a high speed, you probably wouldn't notice it at 60 miles an hour. But when you're rolling down the runway at 150, 160 miles an hour, then little bumps like that are going to be more noticeable. And it's not unlike turbulence. The faster you go through turbulence, the more noticeable it's going to be. But again, so what I'm hearing is it really helps you to know, to be able to manage your expectations by knowing what's going to happen a little bit, and then understanding sights, sounds, and sensations, so that you can feel a little more in control and less worried about it. So so good for you. And then we climbed out. Anything that worthy of mentioning in terms of producing anxiety or anything from the climb out through that all the way into where we started the approach to land?
I think the flight overall was actually pretty smooth up until we approached Las Vegas. Once we got up, kind of to stable elevation.
Cruise altitude.
Yes, cruise altitude. Thank you. I couldn't think of that. It's been a year since I've flown, so that initial, takeoff through the clouds, like, you kind of forget what those sensations are after a while. So that made me a little bit nervous, but once we were at cruise altitude, it was pretty smooth. I think there were a couple of moments of anxiety where I gave you kind of a look of fright.
Right.
And then you just talked me through it and had me breathe and, look right at you during that turbulence. Right up until then we approached Las Vegas, and it definitely got bumpy on that landing into Las Vegas.
Sure, and we're still in the summer months, and we were flying in the midday, and so there are a lot of thermals that come up, and that's what that's all about. you didn't seem to be particularly freaked out. It was just, you were just noticeably elevated a little bit.
At landing or before landing?
Well, during the descent through the turbulence into Las Vegas.
Oh, and that's funny because during the descent, I definitely felt like I was having a lot more anxiety than I was hoping to have.
Yeah.
I think that was the moment where I was like, I was just hoping to be so calm and confident. Right. And I mean, you were definitely helping me through it, but I was definitely feeling it. Like, I just do not like that feeling of descending. And then it did not help that it was pretty bumpy on the way down.
And so can you share with us, if you have the insight, what was it about the descent that made you feel, more anxious about it? I mean, the bumps, obviously, but, was there anything else? What was the story that you were telling yourself, if you can remember that?
It was the bumps. And then I'm definitely noticing that for me, when I look forward on the plane, I mean, just the angle, like visually, my perception, as soon as you can kind of see that downward slant, I just
so we're only maybe just barely going down a little bit like that, and you feel like we're going down like this.
Exactly. I feel like we're like, oh my God, we're going down so fast, and then it was bumpy, so I just felt like we were just coming down really quickly.
Yeah. So the perception of a steep angle and the bumps. It just, not to put words in your mouth, but most people think, okay, we're out of control now for sure.
Yeah. It definitely.
And on landing is something that normally bothers you. What is it about the landing? Because this is something that's key to most everybody listening out there.
So the landing, I mean, it's all of those things kind of coming into the landing. It's that, I think you called it wind rock. As you come right into the landing, that part, especially when you're getting really close, but you still feel the plane rocking back and forth. And so that's when I really think like, oh my gosh, we're not going to land evenly. I don't know what I think. We're going to flip over, or we're going to flip to the side or something. And especially because it was a little bumpy. So I was thinking that. And then usually right at touchdown, it's the sound of I think it's the reverse thrust. Now I know what that is, so I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with it. But that sound has always really bothered me.
Sure. So it's counterintuitive. When you land, you don't expect the engines to roar, right? You expect them to be idle, and the reason they're roaring is because we're deflecting the thrust forward, which is now pushing against the air. And let me go back just real quick to the wing rock on final approach. Do you remember what that was? Do you remember the explanation that I offered you about why we were doing that?
Not exactly. I mean, the crosswind. And,
it's because when if there's any wind at all, the pilots, their primary concern on final approach is to stay particularly precisely lined up with the runway center line. And so anytime the airplane drifts to the left or to the right, they're going to turn back like that. And so you're going to be doing that constantly. And the further we are away from the airport, the less precise we can tell whether we're lined up specific or exactly precisely with the runway center line. So the closer we get in, the more we tend to rock. Okay. And so that's why, and again, it's kind of anxiety producing, because the closer you get to looking out and seeing the ground, and the more we're doing this, the more you would say, oh my God, if they lose control, we're right above their dirt.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that's and I'm assuming that you're probably not moving as much as it feels like you're moving to the right and left. And that's what I keep trying to tell myself now, or I have started watching planes land again without as much anxiety. And so that's been helping.
Yeah. And let's just quickly run through then. Okay. So now you got through it. You did a great job. We turned around and came back, and coming back, I'm going to say was certainly not worse than going down there. Would you say overall it was easier getting on the airplane coming back than it was when you first got to the airport that day?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
It was definitely easier getting on. I think it was really smooth coming back.
Yeah.
And then the only thing was, it was actually more turbulent coming into San Diego than it usually is.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember this, but the pilot said, well, folks, there's going to be turbulence and there's no way around it. Put your seatbelts on or something like that. And so that didn't really help me. So that did make me anxious again landing. And usually I'm pretty comfortable landing in San Diego. I think just because hometown, I know exactly where we are. I know pretty much how it feels like to come into San Diego. And it was a little rockier than usual, but
so the quality of the PA that the pilots make can set you up for that. So what I recommend to people is you kind of reframe what they're saying and just remember. So if we take that announcement they made, hey, there's nowhere around it and all that, try to de-emphasize the no way around it or anything like that. And just imagine, okay, he's just warning us and warning the flight attendants so that we won't be out of our seats or have our seatbelts unfastened there. So, okay, so let's talk about, so the whole big banana in this whole sweepstakes and getting the coaching from me was to make the trip for your business trip coming up, just a week later, right?
Right. Yep, to Chicago. And I was I was more nervous flying to Chicago than I have been flying to the Yucatan in Belize in past years, just because of kind of Midwest weather. And again, I'm not used to a lot of weather, and so I just kept imagining thunderstorms and the windy city and all of that, and it being kind of a 4-hour flight, a little bit longer than I've done for a while. So I definitely had been really nervous about flying to Chicago, but going into it this time, like I was like, okay, I'm going to take all the tools, and I had the harmonizer, and I was going to practice it. So I felt nervous, but more confident going into it.
Okay. So you still had anxiety, which is important to share with people, but you felt like you had a greater ability to manage it. Is that accurate to say it like that? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I just felt, I just felt, I guess confident is the word, but I just felt like I'm going to do this. I'm going to, get through this and get to Chicago and get to that conference.
Very good. And did you board early? Did you meet the pilots? What things did you do compared to the week when we flew together?
So I boarded early.
Okay.
I didn't meet the pilots. I was thinking about it, but I was there with my director, and it just
And that's what I wanted to bring up. So there was a lot of pressure on you from you, self-imposed, because you were worried you're flying with people that your peers and director, and so a little bit about embarrassment about being afraid to fly.
Right. I mean, I'm very comfortable with her, but she's not who I usually fly with. So that was very different too, because you're used to your normal patterns at an airport and your bathroom stops and your seat that you're going to sit in. And so this was all of it was different to me. Flying to a work conference, flying to where I was flying, and then flying who I was flying with. So
and so the overall flight, the takeoff, just, was it better, worse, or and how did you manage it? The flight to Chicago, were your fears about the weather, did they materialize, and how was it?
So it was interesting because it was definitely a different flight than our practice flight, because it was just me with my headphones and the harmonizer and the video and all of that. And so from the very second we got on early, we were able to get settled in, get our seats. I knew every single thing that was happening. I mean, every sound, what the flight attendants were doing. I just felt like I was using all the knowledge that I've gained, all the mechanical and process knowledge. As we were taking off, I was even telling my boss, Maggie, I'm like, this is happening now. And that's, the engine's starting. I know, they're going through their checklist now. And then I think I even said to her about the 15-degree angle at takeoff. And so, I mean, I was, kind of relaying that information, and it really helped. I mean, I just knew kind of every part of that flight. And then it turned out I felt very comfortable on takeoff. For some reason, it wasn't as bumpy that time on the runway. The whole flight up until descent was smooth. We had almost no turbulence. I would say 30 seconds less.
Yeah. So, I've often said that we teach what we most need to learn. And so actually uttering the things that were going through your mind that you had learned from the time that we flew together or leading up to that, and telling them to your supervisor actually helped you to stay in control of your feelings and just reiterated your own confidence in your own abilities.
Yeah. I definitely think, I mean, just that knowledge of what was going on was so helpful, and then reiterating it.
Yeah.
And then the descent into Chicago is a long one, which I had just learned like the night before. And it was long, and it wasn't majorly turbulent, but it was bumpy the entire time, which was a good 30 minutes, I think, at least. But I used the harmonizer, and I used deep breathing and kind of just going through a lot of what we had learned and repeating it in my head all the way down to the landing. And I felt really proud of myself. And I mean, I definitely felt the anxiety with landing, but I felt like it was just much more managed.
Yeah. And people, I tell people, they'll call me and they'll say, the descent didn't work, or this didn't work. And I just ask them, did you use the harmonizer? And they'll say no. And I'm thinking, just use it. Always use it. And if you find it, you don't need it, then you can turn it off. But I really encourage people to use it. So you landed, you had a successful business trip, and the flight back. One of the big things is, people say, it's one thing to be anxious for my flight up, but usually if I'm going for business or vacation or something like that, what happens is the fear of the return flight ruins my time on the ground.
Oh.
So did you find yourself obsessing over the flight back, or were you able to focus on what, on the nature of your trip?
I was able to focus on the trip, and the trip was, I mean, we were only there from Tuesday to Friday. So Tuesday I was fine, Wednesday, fine. Thursday, towards the end of the day, I did find myself getting a little anxious and a little irritable, I think. Plus we were tired.
Yeah, sure.
But I think I was just kind of like, we've got to, get back on the flight again, going out of here. And so I was feeling a little bit on Thursday, and then Friday was such a busy day. Beforehand that I wasn't feeling it too much until we hit Chicago traffic, which took us 3 times the length of time to get to the airport than planned. And I'm usually a 2-hour early arriver, and we got there right as they were boarding.
Okay.
So that did not help my anxiety at all. I basically boarded the plane very anxious, kind of stressed out. So not really the way I wanted to start, but it was kind of good practice, I guess. Because then I just used the deep breathing for that. I started the harmonizer just immediately because I think I was already kind of stressed, and I was expecting the turbulence going out that we had coming in. So I just started immediately with the harmonizer. And I honestly can't even remember if there was really turbulence leaving, but there actually was for about half of that flight. So it was
that's a good thing. That's a good thing that you can't remember if there was turbulence at some part of the flight.
I know. I mean, I remember the takeoff was pretty good. Pretty smooth, but then there was quite a bit there was turbulence, and then they said that there was weather that we were going around on the way back. Usually both of those things would have affected me quite a bit more, but I just every time there was like a little bit more turbulence, or they put the seatbelt signs on, or they talked about the weather, I just started replaying the harmonizer from the start again. And
Good job.
And I closed my eyes. So I discovered that closing my eyes and listening to the harmonizer helps me a lot, because I think that visual perception of the plane moving really affects me. And so I felt, even though it was not at all a smooth flight coming back, I felt much more comfortable.
Cool. And do you have any more flights planned in the near future?
I don't have anything booked, but I'm looking to book something just in the next few months, just a short flight to San Francisco or something, just to keep practicing. So
okay, cool.
I want to make sure that I can keep that up.
And you won the sweepstakes. Would you recommend people just join the doggone sweepstakes and give it a whirl?
Yes, definitely the sweepstakes. Definitely, if you don't win the sweepstakes, purchasing the kit is well worth it. You know, I felt like I was on my way to becoming, to getting to the point where I just wasn't going to want to fly at all. And I feel, not that the anxiety is gone, but I feel like, okay, I'm back to wanting to plan trips again. I'm already talking about a trip to Belize, although that the flight still scares me. I'm like, that length of flight, but I'm talking about it again and kind of thinking about it in my mind. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, stay tuned. Stay tuned to us and stay connected to the show and to Fearless Flight. And I recommend everybody 3 to 4 weeks before you get ready to fly again. So, you know, crank up the harmonizer and just review the things that you've learned and all that. I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing, Terry. It was a delight meeting with you and working with you.
You too.
And we wish you the best in the future. Happy landings, okay?
Thank you so much. And I'll watch the rest of the show.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, and moving right along, let's talk about aviation. Well, we want to talk about the sweepstakes here. So just say a few words about it, Dieter, to remind everybody how they can participate. Or I don't hear your audio for some reason.
Okay, no, I just had myself muted.
Cool.
Yeah, basically between now and October 5th, which is going to be the official launch of our paperback version of the book. We have the sweepstakes going where you can win a coaching day with Captain Ron, and that's an elite custom coaching package. And it includes all the flights. The caveat is, and we've got to make sure that we mention that, is you got to reside in the lower 48 states. So if you're from Europe, Australia, UK, you can or Alaska and Hawaii, you can still win any one of the 27 other prizes, which, just like Terry mentioned, include the Fearless Flight Kit package. You can also win the paperback versions of our book and yearly membership access for 1 year. As well as the Takeoff and Turbulence audiobooks. So it is a really cool way. And I'm not so sure if Terry really mentioned that, but just before we came on, I asked her, and Terry really had just watched our Fearless Flight weekly live show and have never really interacted with us personally up until that point. And I'm just so happy because, I mean, what an amazing story. And I'm just super grateful for you to come on and share that story as well. So the sweepstakes is open until October 5th. As always, you can enter. You can gain more entries by sharing the sweepstakes with your friends and family and coworkers. And then stay tuned, and we'll announce the winners on October 6th or October 7th, actually. So
okay, cool.
That's it about the sweepstakes. I just want to remind everybody about our poll question, and let me just pull this one up once more, because we do have a couple of viewer questions, and I really want to bring that to our attention. And let me just pull up the poll question real quick here. All right, there we go. Can you see it, Ron?
Not yet.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay, perfect. All right, do you wanna just talk a little bit about it, and let's bring Eric on as well, because we do have a couple of questions about flying over water and specifically to Hawaii. So,
okay.
But you get started, and then we'll bring Eric. Oh, there's Eric. Perfect.
Okay, so the main thing is flying over water is a special issue for a lot of people. It involves stories you tell yourself about what's going to happen if we have to land in the water. Well, we're not going to have to land in the water because we take special precautions to not land in the water, and part of those precautions are really an elevation of the standards the requirements for the equipment on the airplane that we have to meet. And so we then can meet standards where we have to be able to fly for 120 minutes or 180 minutes, depending on what our nearest alternate would be. And we do have alternates. Even if you're going across the Atlantic, you've got the Azores out there, which a lot of people aren't that familiar with the geography, and those are suitable alternates. And that's how we do it. So anyway, you said there were a couple of questions there, Dieter?
Yeah. So one of the things is one of the questions that was asked is, what are the three things that pilots, or the top three safety things that have to be considered when flying from the mainland to Hawaii? And so I just wondered, Eric, if you can talk about the special considerations that you guys are going through to ensure that you get back safely to where your family is. So,
can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You're 1 by 5, so if you're going to say something, I'll have to pause to register what you're saying. I'm having so much technical difficulty. But as just on a thumbnail, which is what we have time for, as Ron mentioned, there's an elevated standard to fly over water called ETOPS, ETOPS, Extended Twin Engine Operation Specifications. And we have extra requirements for the overwater flight, extra inspections, and only certain airplanes can make that trip. And in the case of Hawaii, all the airplanes have to be at least capable of what we call 180 minutes of flight on a single engine. And so we have a point picked off in point of time in the middle called the equal time point. And should we have a problem before the equal time point that precludes us completing the trip, we can turn around and fly back to a coastline alternate. And if such a thing comes up after that point, we can continue to the islands and be perfectly capable of flight on one engine for that 3-hour time period, well within the alternate envelope. And we carry fuel. We carry fuel in case we need to make that deviation, and then we carry extra fuel on top of that. So it's pretty. The options are, of course, much more limited than flying over ground, but the plan in case of a deviation is very, very well thought out. And because of the elevated maintenance and certification levels on these airplanes, minimal problems come up like that. What we call air turnbacks are very few and far between, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so I would just kind of summarizing that, I would say that the three main things are: we do extra flight planning on that. We have an extra level, a higher standard of maintenance and reliability for that. And I would say just overall the planning and the fuel planning to make sure that we have plenty of gas to do that. Is that fair? Those are probably three of the more important things that are part of the bigger picture as to making that thing safe.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Actually, Eric, that is one of the things that you so graciously contributed to the book, because in our book we actually talk about flying over water and what exactly that entails. And you, Eric, you're out there, so you provided us with the first-hand knowledge, which is really, really great. What I have another question is, when they're, and that might just be from that person, but what if in general they don't carry, she doesn't like delays, but is there any special reason why there might be delays when you fly to Hawaii, like Maui or something like that, like because of all these special considerations? Are you guys a little bit more stringent, or how?
I think the answer to all those questions is yes. The departure time, because people aren't generally connecting off the islands and continuing to fly to Asia. That's usually a destination. The company sets up departure times in what we call mid-bank, when there's very low traffic, and we rarely sit out at the runway at all. We start one engine, the second engine, warm it up, do the checklist, and boom, gone. But yes, that would be a factor, because if we're sitting there parked and delayed, we're burning that cushion of fuel we have. And of course, we always have extra for the extra, but we wouldn't in general sit out and burn that before we go. That would mess up the overwater flight planning, and we don't generally have to do it because of the departure times. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the delays and any delays that we had before we would start the engines were probably related to making sure that the equipment's ready. So it might be checks that they had to do to make sure, maybe fix the auxiliary power unit or things like that. So, you know, yeah, so it's probably going to be related.
And I will say this for Air Canada. I remember in 2015 flying from Toronto to Venice, and we were delayed, I think, 3 hours on the tarmac. And amongst the things that were fixed was actually a light bulb in a lavatory. And
and that speaks to the whole thing that we talked about. Yeah. And what may be counterintuitive to the average person, like, come on, how important can a light in the lab be? I was delayed 4 hours one time in a 737 for the same reason. You cannot go unless the emergency exit lights work in the lab. So that just speaks to what has to happen on any flight, let alone an overwater flight.
And I do want to segment in a little bit to our aviation news roundup, where we're going to talk about, you know, mostly really that nothing happened ultimately, but you know, there was an event in the news of an American Airlines mechanic, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But I do want to get to David Vicente. Hey, David, he is flying very, very shortly, I believe on Friday. He mentioned. What other than listening to the harmonizer when, you know, it's Tuesday evening, from at least the ones of us watching and being on the show in the Western Hemisphere, what about other strategies or tools that you can suggest to David, who's flying on Friday? I'm not sure where he's going, and maybe actually he's flying tomorrow. Forget it. So between now and tomorrow, what are your top recommendations for David, Captain Ron?
Listen to the harmonizer. You know, I would.
But he's asking what other than.
I know. I would have recommended some coaching. You know, because if you find that you are stuck and you can't think of anything else, then that's why you want to bring in some other people there. But for right now, you know, the Fearless Flight Kit goes beyond just the harmonizer. If takeoff is something that bothers you, there are takeoff videos in there. If turbulence is something that bothers you, there's a turbulence video in there. So those are the things when you get within 24 hours, and if you haven't done anything other than that, then you're pretty much stuck with where you're at. But I've had people never, ever having access to the harmonizer, except they bought it in the terminal and report back to me that was enough to keep them distracted, to keep their anxiety manageable. So I know David's been listening to us for some time. I've been talking to him through some messenger chats. And I would say that you know, I think David's in pretty good shape. But at this point in time, your options are limited there. So anyway,
I do wanna bring up one technique, and that is the breathing straw exercise. So
and that's in the book. So if you don't have the book,
in the book,
you can download the book off the Kindle tonight, and that spells out a whole bunch of other things that you can do. So that's probably the best thing that we could offer right now is to get the book and the drinking straw exercise in there. And we do have don't we have an audio that you can download to that if you get the book?
It's not so for you, David. Just email us or message us here on Facebook, and I'll make sure that I get you the link, because I do believe that you were one of the amazing supporters on our pre-launch date that helped us to get to #1. So we'll make sure that you get access to it before your flight. But for everybody else, when you buy the Kindle version, you will get access. I forget the chapter, probably number.
It's in the last part 3.
13. So it's in part 3. That's correct.
Yeah.
So that was that. Is there anything else that other than the drinking straw?
Well, you just look through chapter 11, 12, and 13. Those have the strategies in them. So, yeah.
And Terry just said in the chat, she said, looking up the mechanics of flying was super helpful. So getting an understanding, which is really part 2 in the book, really helps too, to put our minds at ease, because we can fill the voids that we often fill out with our stories that we make up. We can fill them with facts. We can fill them with empirical knowledge that can help. Now, that's only half of the equation, but it is a very important part of the equation. And so with that, let's just move on so we can
yeah, let's talk real quickly there about the you have a personal stake in that, Eric. You were quite upset about that when you and I talked about that, and your upset was about worrying about people blowing that out of proportion and worrying about that, and that being this incident where they've charged a mechanic at American Airlines with sabotage for doing something really dumb and if not dangerous. But they caught the thing in normal operation. So you want to touch on that, Eric?
Sure. If we're going to keep going, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. I told Ron how upset I was about that. And I actually was thinking, gee, I'm glad my dad has departed the earth. How embarrassed I would have been to tell him that a mechanic had sabotaged an airplane. I never thought either one of us would live that long. And when I got over that part, I started thinking, well, what's the flip side? One, that's the only time I've ever heard of it in my entire flying life. Two, he did it, and unbeknownst to anybody else, and the pilots taxied out, and the system squawked itself. And it said it was an air data computer, and the airplane says, hey, I have an air data computer fault.
Yeah.
And since nobody else knew about it, when the pilots called back to maintenance on the ground there, maintenance said, yeah, you better come back to the gate and have us have a look at it. And then I thought, well, our people will go, well, what if they had taken off? And well, what if they had? Depending on the airplane will either have 2 or 3 air data computers. And if they roll down the runway and take it off, a whole bunch of flight instruments on one side would have been inoperative, but the other side would have been operative just fine. And not only that, the pilot with the inoperative or faulted set of flight displays would easily be able to push a button and select the other side air data computer so that all displays would be normal and it would appear as if everything was working normally. They'd be able to do that and return for a landing. And the very end of it, the video surveillance was so good, they caught the guy. So, yeah. So he's done in the mechanic business. Well, it's a horrible thing. It's extremely rare. The airplane detected its own fault. And if the airplane hadn't detected its own fault, it was easily manageable in the air. And as we talk about the holes of Swiss cheese that need to line up for an accident, there are multiple layers of protection and or abilities for the pilots to cope with it, as sad as it was to see that news.
And this is Fearless Flight. And what's our main mission at Fearless Flight? Our main mission is to help you change the way you think about flying. So if you should obsess about this, you're not going to have any other experience but being miserable and terrified. And you may or may not then choose to fly. But it's like everything else. This was an isolated incident, and we just have to move past this. And fear of flying is about changing the way that you think about flying. It's E plus R equals O. Something happens in the news, in this case, a sabotage attempt by a mechanic. and then you have to look at the story you tell yourself. If you say that could happen on my flight, that could happen on any flight. Yeah, that's true. But then you have to look at the likelihood and the rarity that Eric mentioned. And that's the thing about airplane incidents that make the news. Because they are so rare, they become more likely to be reported than the news. So my advice is move on and don't let this ruin your life, ruin your enjoyment of flying, and ruin your plans for vacation and business. So anyway, that's really all that I want to dedicate to that. That's enough. That's enough for that part there. The last thing we want to talk about here is the 201 class coming up in Los Angeles on October 26th. Eric is going to be there with me once again. We're going to be dazzling ourselves, if nobody else, up in the front of the mock-up, talking about how you can get over your fear flying if you're anywhere near the Los Angeles area. We really, really hope to see you out there. We got people signing up left and right. And if you have any doubts about just how much fun and success you can experience in that, come to the class. We have the special early bird, super early bird pricing on still, and Dito have to remind me. I think September 15th. So you've got just a few more days until the super early bird pricing drops off of that. But we really encourage you to come and do that. And you do have the days off, right, Eric? I think you're planning on it anyway.
Yes, I'm attempting to wrench it loose. It's not done yet.
Okay, cool. So with that, we've gone long tonight. We want to get you off of the air and invite you to come back next week. So if you have any questions for us, once again, put them up, post them on our Facebook page. Please, if you haven't joined our Birds of a Feather group, do that. The numbers are growing, and we're getting a lot of good mutual support from people. We're getting just a real supportive message out there, and people are helping one another, encouraging each other, and that's what it's all about. It's about connecting with other people and getting out of the isolation and the shame that goes along with overcoming your fear of flying. So
I wanna give a quick shout out to Elaine. Elaine said the 201-301 class is a blast. I encourage anyone to take it, and she was so much committed to the class that she actually came in crutches to the class, which I'm not sure if we showed that picture or not, but it was just really, really cool to see her there. And yeah, we had over 50 people. It was a great group. So make sure you take advantage of the super early bird special that we got going right now until Saturday at midnight. And the reason why, and maybe we can end with that, and Eric, actually I'm gonna let you have the last word here. Why is it so important? Why are we on people that are considering the class? Why are we encouraging them so much to book or to register early? What do you, from having been there, try?
I'll tell them two things. Not to do as I say, not to do as I do. Number one, don't procrastinate on buying the airplane ticket, because there's only so many of them and there's so many at the low price. And that's what I usually do. I wait thinking it will last forever, and then I pay 2 or 3 times the amount that I would have had to pay for it anyway, just to enrage myself. But that's a personal hobby. The other reason is the last time we had a group there, we had 27 out of 29 people get on board the airplane. And it was phenomenal. And they were scared to death, but they bonded as a group and they fought through it. And by the return flight, they were just so deliriously happy. And we also had about 20 other people in the audience who had not intended to fly that day and did not buy a ticket. However, after sitting through the class, between bonding with the other classmates and everything else, they wished they had a ticket that day and wished they could have gone. But it was, at that point, sold out, too late to go. But they made the commitment to come there to class. And if they'd had a ticket in their hands, they could have flown, but it was not an option when they had waited that long.
Yeah.
And that's not us doing crunch marketing. That's just the airplane. There's X amount of seats. And if you don't have a ticket for one, you're going to be out of luck when it's time to go.
So come with us. We're going to have a special guest over there, a fellow named Arnold Barnett is going to talk to us about the odds of dying in a plane crash. He's going to make sense out of that as an added extra bonus. So come to the class, 201. Remember, there's a guarantee. If you buy the tuition, if you buy the ticket to the class in the morning and you fly with us in the afternoon, if you're not 100% satisfied to your satisfaction, then we'll give you your money back. Not the money for the airfare. You're gonna have to talk to Southwest about that. But other than that, so I want to thank Eric again for joining us tonight, and Derek. God,
the other guy.
It's almost error free. And
the other guy.
That's my brother Dieter and my other brother. Yeah. So anyway, thanks to both of you guys, and happy landings, everybody. And we'll see you again next week.
All right. Good night, everybody. By the way, Southwest will give you a credit for your airfare, so don't worry.
I was going to mention that procrastination is approved by Southwest. If you really don't want to go, you can keep kicking it down the road every 90 days. Just keep kicking it down the road. That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's your great tip here at the end. Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Dieter.